What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our SEC football channel.
Matt Luke has been coined as an Ole Miss man. He certainly is, based on his dedication and loyalty to the university, having played there, been a student there, of course, and head coach of the football team for 2 years. But in name only for the rest of his life, but an Ole Miss man no longer in regards to being the head coach of the Rebels football program. We got Jake Evans on the line from the Rebel Walk to talk about Matt Luke's tenure, but most importantly, what lies ahead for Ole Miss's coaching search. Jake, how you doing today?
Well, Mark, like we said, I'm doing well, but it's been a chaotic last 24 hours here. It kind of slapped us here on the back end of the holidays and didn't really see this one coming, honestly.
I didn't either. A number of people had asked me to look at coaching vacancies or possible vacancies, who was on the hot seat. His name was brought up a number of times, and I just thought, considering the circumstances of what he inherited last year, based on winning, I believe, 6 games last year. I know they fell to 4-8, but it was awfully close and should have won the game in the Egg Bowl. We know what the circumstances were at the end of the game. We also know, in looking at how they competed against the likes of teams like Auburn and Texas A&M within one score, I just thought, especially considering his roots and his loyalty and dedication to the program, and again, what he inherited, that he was due another season.
Yeah, and that's what most Ole Miss people thought too, is that, even though in his 3 years he went 6-6, 5-7, and 4-8, and so in a results-based business, a 15-21 record in 3 years it normally is not going to get you any extra time. However, most people thought that he was going to get at least one more year to work this out because, like you said a minute ago, he inherited the program 3 years ago with pretty much the worst conditions imaginable. This was right when Ole Miss was coming out of the NCAA's doghouse, and they pretty much had scrapped the team. There was scholarship reductions. It was a really, really bad time when he inherited the program. And a lot of people thought that, given those circumstances, the fact that he had Ole Miss kind of knocking on the doorstep again to start competing in the SEC like he did this year, even though he went 4-8, a lot of those games were a lot closer than people thought. And so people thought he had kind of turned the corner and deserved at least one more year with these guys. But it sounded like today, and Keith Carter, the athletic director, had his press conference today, and it sounded like it all just kind of went downhill after the Egg Bowl, and the stars just kind of aligned for them to finally pull the trigger and fire him.
You mentioned the name Keith Carter just here in the last 10 seconds. I did not was not aware who the athletic director was at Ole Miss. Are we talking Keith Carter, basketball player, shooter from the outside?
That's right.
Wow.
Keith Carter. Yep. He played Ole Miss, played basketball for the Rebs back in the day. Went and played overseas, and then he's been back working in an administrative capacity for the last few years with Ole Miss. And then the thing that's really weird about this, that really threw a lot of people off, was the fact that he was introduced. He's been the interim athletic director for a few months now, and 10 days ago was an opening press conference. He said that Matt Luke is our guy. He's our guy. We're building around him. We're excited about what he's doing. And so everybody seeing that made this that much more of a shock, because 10 days ago, Matt Luke was our guy. And all of a sudden, all of that kind of went out the window. So people were really interested to hear what he had to say this morning. And he kind of just circled around the fact that when they took an objective look at the program after the Egg Bowl, they realized that the combination of lack of fan support and a loss of a massive amount of revenue, they realized that they just kind of had to bite the bullet and go on and start rebuilding.
Yeah, I understand it. It's big time college athletics. And if you wait, sometimes you get, taken to the wayside and blown away, especially in a conference like the SEC, where you need to stay in check, and money speaks volumes, and W's typically equal the money. And they just didn't have enough of those this year, didn't get to a bowl game, all of that. At the same time, again, I thought that he was going to be given a little bit more leash because of a number of reasons we already talked about in regards to his dedication, loyalty, and the situation in which he was thrown into, and the narrow nature of many of their losses this year. They were competitive against decent teams in the SEC, very good teams in the case of Auburn in particular. All right, so you haven't had a whole lot of time to digest all of this, Jake, but in regards to who people are talking about being reasonable, we always like to put that on the line, because these vacancies occur, and the fan base has all sorts of dreams about certain coaches coming. But in regards to reasonable choices and candidates for this job.
So right now, they're in Keith Carter's press conference this morning, he made it clear that they don't have a short list set already. But most people think that Ole Miss's top candidates are kind of the top candidates for most of the big jobs, the Arkansas, Missouri type of jobs. So that short list right there includes Billy Napier of Louisiana Lafayette, Lane Kiffin out of Florida Atlantic, Mike Leach, Mike Norvell out of Memphis. It's kind of the same crop of people that are being looked at for most of the big jobs across the country. Being these smaller non-Power 5 head coaches, and that's another thing Keith Carter said. He said, we don't have a specific person in mind yet, but we are 100% looking for a sitting head coach or a Power 5 coordinator.
Okay, so all of those guys are very well respected, have done a great job at their particular jobs currently. So I would certainly not think that they were making a misstep by hiring any of those guys. Obviously, Mike Leach, you go that direction, you're bringing in a certain character and personality that you need to be okay with outside of the football. But in regards to what he's shown us on the field at Washington State and Texas Tech, they have been much better programs with Mike Leach than they were before, or we're going to assume after at Washington State. And that's been his MO. Got Jake Evans on the line from the Rebel Walk. So if you want to continue your search in regards to investigating the Ole Miss coaching search, what the Rebels are looking toward, all of that, the Matt Luke analysis, please jump over there to the Rebel Walk and the coverage of Ole Miss football and basketball there. So, Jake, in regards to expectations, what is reasonable for this football program going forward? We know that in the past, this has been, I would say, over the last 25 to 30 years has been a program in which you should expect to get to bowl games almost all the time. You should win 7 or 8 games. You're not going to compete, although Hugh Freeze was able to do it, and that was called into question, obviously, based on what we discovered later. Compete for SEC championships. Certainly, if things cycled correctly and you catch Alabama and LSU and Auburn or whomever else in a down year, you certainly want to aim to go to Atlanta here at some point, but the expectations that are reasonable for this football program once it gets, its footing.
Once it gets its footing, I think that a realistic expectation is probably around 8 wins a year. And the thing is most people think that's very doable. This year, obviously, like we said, it's a numbers-based business, and you have to win games to keep your job. And this year, the Rebels were 4-8, but the thing was that the optimistic thing that had a lot of people really, excited for next year was the fact that, like you said, a lot of those games were very close losses, and the fact that Ole Miss was competing against teams that most people didn't think would even, didn't even think Ole Miss would stand a chance against. So realistically, I think we're looking at a 2 or 3 year rebuilding project. So these next couple years, I think we're probably looking at more 4-8s and 5-7s. Next year, the schedule is Ole Miss has got one of the hardest, I guess, 3 or 4 game stretches right off the bat. I think week 3 through 5, they play Auburn, Alabama, and LSU, I believe, if that's right. I can't remember exactly, but it's three of the top SEC teams back to back. And so realistically, next year is probably going to be another 4-8 type of year. But within the next few years, 8 wins really is on the table with the talent that they think they have on this team.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe if you love the game that we love. Best discussion, debate, and analysis you will find online. College football discussion all over the map, and with all these coaching changes, keep it locked in right here. Also join Jake and the rest of the staff there. Evie, certainly heading things up there at the Rebel Walk, so please join them for Ole Miss football, basketball, and overall athletics coverage. Jake, we appreciate you stopping by and taking the late notice and making time for us.
Mark, thank you much. Always glad to be here.